All right. Good
Hey,
morning. Good morning here on February 7th. It is a Friday, so that's good. 2025, and it's the morning hour on the Dev Talk Show. I'm here with my co host, Rich Ross. Good to see you, Rich. And
good to see you too, Chris. It is
hopefully, yeah, go ahead.
well for those of us here in at least for me, and I almost wore it. It's Super Bowl weekend,
Yes, that's right. That's
so
true.
we are very excited around here. So go Birds! We'll see what Sunday brings.
That's true. We are in Southeast Pennsylvania, so it is pretty hyped around here, pretty exciting. I'm sure if you're a lifelong Eagles fan, this is what it's all about. And I mean, I'm a transplant,
All right.
um, so these aren't my teams, but it doesn't mean I always enjoy the Super Bowl. Sometimes it's the only football game I get to watch every year. I actually think there's only two or three football games I watch every year, and this is unusual. We used to watch football a lot. Thanksgiving
Okay.
and Christmas, if they do happen to have Christmas Day games, which happened this year. It
Seems to
just kind of
be.
depends
Yeah.
depends on when Christmas falls, I think. And then Super Bowl. And the reason why is because nobody dares schedule hockey on Super Bowl Sunday. So
Yes. You're not competing
otherwise
with that.
otherwise my Sundays are usually spent at hockey rinks. So
Yes.
anyways, yeah.
But fun.
Yeah. I'm hoping it's a great game. That's what I always look forward to. But
Yeah.
I will
I think
admit
regardless
I
we've got
yeah.
that going.
Yeah, I was gonna say that if they can't stop Barkley, it may be over very quickly. But
Yeah. Yeah.
we'll see because the last time these two teams got together, if I remember correctly, for the Super Bowl, if I remember correctly, I think the Eagles had a lead, but it wasn't more than a score. And I remember thinking, man, you can't stay within a score with Patrick Mahomes. And
Yeah. It was two scores. It was 10 points at the
was it?
half. Yeah.
Gosh dang, he's good. I mean, I've watched him.
Yeah.
He's good. He's good.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Cool. Now that we're kind of warmed up, let's I was wondering what you were doing as we were getting ready. Like, we should just hit the button. What's he doing? Well, you were of course setting a title and getting probably a
yeah,
description as well for what we wanted to talk about. And
right.
we just kind of just kind of as we came in to jump on a call right before 8 o'clock, we started. I was kind of reflecting on the last couple of shows that we've done and the fact that they're focused on kind of using AI and just kind of jumping in like, well, here's a service, here's you can get going for free, and here's how you might do that. And we ran into some questions, and a bit of a block on the first one that we figured out and got around and all that. And it's kind of like, okay, we've kind of showed some things. We still have some things to show and talk about. Both in the GitHub models that we were playing around in, and maybe even over in the our sample app for AI, as it were, Hello Dolly. But I think wanted to just kind of start today and maybe just have a question. I have this is the kind of conversation I'm having with customers. Pretty much 2/3 of my sessions are about AI, at least directly. It's always an AI conversation, but at least, hey, we're doing AI for them or working with them on it. And I wanted to, just have open a discussion with Chris and anybody who's in chat. Just what questions do you have when it comes to AI and thinking about AI in your application? And how much of a paradigm shift is that for you all in kind of jumping in that direction? Because it's coming at us all very quickly, and at some point, if they're not already, somebody in the management team is going to come down and say, why aren't we doing this? Right? And how can we make our apps better? So and I'm sure, Chris, it sounds like you have some questions based off of what we've done the last couple of sessions too. So, yeah.
Yeah, and some of them I think are very broad, and some are pretty narrow. But the term AI has been thrown around before, and I don't know if it's because, like, I feel like there was a time when machine learning was being called AI. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm imagining that.
No.
But I feel like this wave of AI. Is it fair to say that the time that what the term usually means is generative AI based on training out of a data model, large or small, and then having the agent, I don't know if I'm using the right term, it might take questions directly for you or a prompt of some kind, and then it generates something. Doesn't have to be
Yeah.
text, just something.
Yes. Yeah, because you're right. With some of the image stuff, it's not text. It's taking that text that we gave it and coming back with a picture. Or, if you say, come back with, I've seen people use it to, come back with a flow diagram using using an open source tool that I it'll come to me what it's called, but basically
Like
using that
Mermaid or
tool's
something, maybe?
language. Mermaid, that's it. I was
Yeah.
stuck on the M and I couldn't get past it.
Right.
But yeah, so that idea of, well, here's this, kind of go through that process. Here's this image of a diagram, translate that into text of what's here. And then, okay, now that we've got the text of what is created, let's go send it to Mermaid to regenerate, right? So I'm kind of doing that loop of, getting back to what it was. So yeah, I think that what's great about it is it's easy. I didn't say it's easy. That's the wrong thing to say. It's possible, given the right prompt, which is where all of this AI conversation starts with, right? What am I asking it to do? How am I giving it context in what I want it to focus its response around? How can I do that? The capabilities to do that gives me the options to go in all kinds of different directions. But there are some models that are basically built to do certain things, right? There's a model to, you can do images. I think you can view images in GPT models, but something like creating an image is DALL-E focused, right? Or something that can take audio. There are models that are focused on taking the audio pattern and bringing that in, essentially. So,
Yeah. So the reason I brought
See.
this up, is I found this video a little while ago. There are several channels that do this, but this just happens to be one I came across. I'm not going to say it's the most popular or whatever, but what this particular site, or I'm sorry, YouTube channel has been doing, it's been taking the 1950s style of film, that vintage look where everything's really saturated or whatever, and they're making movie trailers, but they're modern, like Star Wars Force Awakens, Star Wars Return of the Jedi. And then to make it even more interesting is the person will often pick a celebrity, a modern celebrity, or even a past celebrity. And so all of the AI images, like, instead of it being Bruce Willis in Armageddon, it might be Steve McQueen.
Right.
Now,
because that's of the time. Yeah.
right. Now, this particular video was a tutorial on how did I do it. And what I found fascinating by it is I realized, wow, look at all the different tooling being used. They're all generation of there's different types of generation going on here. There is using generation just to get those images. And then as a creative, as somebody who can video edit, even though the image is a still, they might pan across the still or come in on the still while the narrator is speaking.
Yeah.
And so that gives it that feeling of motion, even if there is not motion. But
right.
So that's just one step. This is images that match the script using, I'm not sure if this is Midjourney. I'm really not 100% sure. Yeah, it looks like it's Midjourney. And I mean, the prompts to come up with the images are pretty impressive. So clearly wanted it to be Marilyn Monroe in The Force Awakens is what he was looking for. That's the imagery. But then also using Suno to create music. Yeah. And using another tool, and I don't know which one this was. I mean, obviously we're not going to watch the whole thing. It might be ChatGPT to create the script that's going to be read.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. So then after that, transform the images into videos. Okay, that felt very Adobe Premiere. And then what isn't being shown here, maybe because I just haven't found it, is there's plenty of AI voices right now that fit tones. And so you find the one that has that 1950s announcer voice of like, you know, of like, I don't even know that I can do it,
Yeah, I mean,
but
who was doing the announcing in the 50s, right? It's like, it's not John Facenda. That's the, I mean, it's that kind of that time frame, but I don't know that that's what he did.
so like, here's a Fantastic Four one, and I'm not 100% sure. And
That's interesting.
it's got the hollow recorded in a radio studio sound.
Okay.
Even puts in a little film grain.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And so I know this is for fun, but it really made me realize, okay, it's not just chat.
Right.
This person is using a battery of tooling to come up with a product at the end that got, you know, 167,000 views, which is great. And I mean, I know that again, we're talking about an entertainment choice, but it got me thinking about, okay, using these agents, there's different pivots on this. It can be using it in your application as
Right.
something that assists the user or assists your I don't even know if I want to call it the server, but maybe that's what it is, in accomplishing a task, but even just helping you accomplish tasks. So are those different categories is, you know, or how does it help? And one answer is assisting you in your development tasks,
Yep.
but also assisting you in creative tasks.
Yeah. I mean, when we think of Copilot, right, doing that for the development side, but creative things of, you know, I'm doing a blog post, right? So help me write the blog post. Help me, you know, help me do an image, you know, for the blog post as well. That eye-catching image that sits there, right? All of those are things that different models can pull together, and it's just a matter of helping with your creativity. And I think that's where, I don't know, for me, I certainly use it for suggestions. Trying not to rely on it completely, although I tend to when I'm working on code, say, okay, that looks good. Let's see if it runs, kind of thing. But yeah, I think that's the that. It's so all right. So this one here, this is the one you're pulling up.
Yeah.
This is some, and I think there are things that we can look at the AI side from. What am I doing from a developer, and how can I help the developer side? And certainly, GitHub Copilot is a huge help there when it comes to writing code, or what what we typically call, you know, reducing the cognitive burden, right? Taking care of the things that are hard, and maybe, you know, going and finding the answer on through Bing or what have you, is challenging. Whereas asking, you know, Copilot, things kind of get surfaced to you that you can then iterate on. But I think the other thing is, you know, things that are hard, like naming. Naming is hard. Somebody left a comment, you know, this is from the future. Naming is
Right.
hard.
Yeah, that's
Right.
right.
So make it, you know, when I go to rename something, having the ability to make suggestions for me. If I want to do that, do my commit, what's the message I should put in there, right? Those are things that make it easier for the developer. So if we take those thoughts, which are great, but how can we also make things easier on the user? And I think that's kind of the piece you have here, which I love from Steve
Yes.
Sanderson.
Right. Right. This is about, like, so, you know, I wasn't trying to jump ahead too quickly, but like when you think
No,
about
that's
the
fine.
different ways it helps, is one of them is it can assist me. The way we think about it with Copilot is it assists me writing code. Okay. But I feel like there's probably assistance in creative tasks that we overlook. You just mentioned naming things that might be interesting, but assisting the end user. So now we're integrating it into our apps, and not just in a chat way, not just like, oh, how can I help? This is more of, I've got this information sitting somewhere, but it's not in this exact format. And this form doesn't even know what it is. But if I paste it in, then it's smart enough to say, well, this is the first name, this is the last name, here's the phone number, here's the address, and just fills the form out for you.
Yes, and I think part of that is it's a little bit that the AI is smart enough, but it's also that the development team is smart enough to create the prompt that the prompt almost gives the intelligence to the large language model or the frontier model that's doing the response, right? If I
Okay.
don't frame it in this like here's your here's your role, right? I'm going to give you some text. Text could be in any kind of a format, but it is an address. So give it back to me in this format so that I can then paste it into, or so that when I paste it, it goes into the control the right way.
So smart components is an experiment that Steve showed off here recently. I thought it was really cool 10 months ago, according to that.
Yeah.
The prompt, that portion of this, is it fair to say that that's I don't want to say it's hidden, but it's been implemented for you. So you just bring the components in, put them in your app,
Mm-hmm.
and it's great. It's an awesome idea. But it sounds like what I feel like I'm hearing you say is that we could. Oh, this is interesting, right? Um, that might be more of what he's doing here. Is if you want to bring this into your own applications and not just have it be bouncing back and forth chat messages, and you have to understand the technique of taking this thing, take this report, take this view, take this input, and categorize it in a way very similar to what you were doing when we did on a previous show of it would listen to the audio of the show or the transcript of the show. You fed it the
Mm-hmm.
transcript of the show and it summarized it.
Right.
And I was
Yeah.
actually
Oh,
really
yeah. I remember
impressed
that.
by the summaries, right? And I was really impressed considering how I think you would say the prompts were pretty basic.
Yeah, they were.
You were just kind of
We
like, hey,
didn't
take the show transcript and tell us what happened. It wasn't really digging into to get probably the depth you wanted.
because we were doing it on the fly, but
Yeah.
and B, since then I've seen, and so two things. Not only are we providing the prompt, but we're also providing that large volume of text, which is a we talk about the currency of talking to an LLM is the token, right? So, and they've actually split things up now where the tokens that you input to the LLM is one size and the response that comes out is another size. It used to be all packaged together that if it was a 4,000 token limit, that includes not only what you send in, but what you expect to get back. And they've now started to split that out where I get 128,000 tokens or whatever it is to put in, and I can get 4,000 back or 8,000 back. And those budgets are essentially separate. So what that means is because we were basically sending in that an hour's dialogue from a show, when we send that in, we had to keep the prompt kind of small because we were bumping up against the limit. But I've seen prompts that are probably as long as that text from the show transcript. They can be that involved. It just depends on what it is you're trying to elicit back from the response.
Yeah, I've heard the term prompt engineering, and
Mm-hmm.
as if like, hey, that's something we've all got to get better at. So, I mean, um, I don't know if this is true for a lot of people watching, but I feel like a few years ago, I mean, because I know Build is coming up soon,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember Build last year very focused on AI, and I mean, I don't know, but I'm gonna bet that that's what Build is going to be this year too. I don't know that. I don't have any schedule. I do know
Right.
that Brad Sams recently did a video where he talked about Build's coming, and it's going to be all about AI. So I'll just quote Brad. But
That'll leave me out of it. Yeah, I don't. Build, is always some. There's always some interesting stuff that comes out of that
yeah,
for developers.
but I feel like sometimes you can come out of it really still head scratching, saying, "How do they even want this at work?" Because I think at the beginning, a lot of organizations just said, "Don't touch it." And it could be some of it because of misconceptions about how if you let anything near AI, then all that data gets sucked into this global kind of data model, and it's all proprietary, and we can't allow that to happen, so we're just cut off.
Yeah.
But I agree with what you said earlier. At some point, somebody's going to come down from management and say, "Why aren't we taking advantage of this?" The cost. I just read something about cost effectiveness, blah blah blah. So I'm trying to figure out like as a developer, what do I where do I need to start, and is it with understanding some of these underlying basics? You said LLM, you said tokens.
Yeah.
Is it that important to start there, or is it something you can play around with to say, okay, I think I have an idea?
Yeah. I think that's why I was going down the path of the GitHub models, because they're free, depending on what, as we saw, what version of GitHub Copilot you have, right? If you have the free version, because that's easy to get with VS Code, there are some limits. There's availability, but there are throttling. Yeah, for it's probably the best term, right? But so there's a way to get started. If you even wanted to run through some of the samples that are there, run through some of the getting started, or just start asking it questions, and that opens the mind of hey, where are we going to go? I think just being open to that conversation is really important. I think the thing to you were talking about your data and different services, and kind of why things got shut down. There are some services that will, you know, take your data and use it in training the models, right? And that's I mean, I can talk about things from the Microsoft side and what we do in Azure OpenAI and what we're doing models, in that your data is your data. It stays inside of your tenant. We're not using it to train your models. And if you understood how long it takes to train the models, right? It's really it's not something kind of cost effective for us even to entertain doing with that data. So there's that hurdle to get past, and then once you get, we've been talking to customers about this for coming up on 2 years, with something we do monthly with customers, and bring them in for a day and talk about AI, and some of the, I mean, even as recently, I think it was probably about within the last 12 months, we had someone come in and ask the data question, even though we've been pushing the message that your data doesn't get used for anything. It's it's completely your data, and it stays in your tenant, and it's encrypted and all that great stuff. So I think that's the biggest hurdle in talking to customers to get past. And once they realize that data is not going to be used to train the models, it's not going to exfiltrate or go anywhere else, it stays inside of your tenant. Those things are make it easier for them to say, okay, so let's talk about then how can we leverage generative AI for what we're doing, and what can we start to build out. And I probably went off on a
So
tangent there, you would expect. So
no,
go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, it depends on what applications you're working on, but a lot of us,
Yeah.
I guess a lot of people are working on, you have an application, you have like a phone app, you have a web app, maybe they're two different sides of the same coin. Like some
Mm-hmm.
people sit at a desktop, some people are on a phone. Coming up with tasks or things, I keep using the word tasks. Coming up with ideas there, like the smart components idea, I think is more about assisting you with your work, which I guess is a pretty common place to go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Part of it's
If you
coming up with the
Go ahead.
ideas. I think it's coming up with the
Okay.
ideas. Yeah.
So one of the things that I would suggest, and I've been suggesting this to actually a lot recently with some of the conversations we have with customers, is Steve Sanderson back at .NET Conf, and actually he did it over the summer. I guess it finally got released over at .NET Conf. Was his eShop support application, and I don't know if you've seen that one. But basically, what that is, he took. So if you think about the smart components, those are awesome, and they're actually component vendors who incorporated those ideas into their latest release, right? So that they're taking that thought of, hey, how can we do generative AI to make the controls, our component controls smarter, and those are, I forget which vendor is doing that, but there's a vendor who's rolling those out. But this here is, it does have a little bit of the smart component in there, if I recall right. But the important thing here is it's a call center, so a call and more, I guess, more correctly, it is an online, feedback center, right? So I have a question about a product, or I'm trying to make a return, or which product of yours will help me get this kind of functionality. So these are the things that are being prompted on a website, and this is awesome because this application here has both parts. It has the front end part for the customer, but it has the back end part for the customer service rep. And what it does here is basically, as somebody posts something to the front end, it takes that information and runs it through a bunch of different generative AI models. And it's doing a couple things. It's summarizing what's being asked, it's categorizing what's being asked, and it's giving an overall sentiment value of the tone of the person who's making the request. So what you get then is, you click on one of those items. Now I have some, without reading anything, without reading the actual, let's just say that, without reading the actual thing that the person submitted, I get a very clear picture on, well, what's going on here? Are they irate? Is this a problem? Is this something that I can and just get an idea of where they could where this case needs to go. And that's huge, right? Because think about how much time you would need to kind of get your mind around prepping and going through this, and you start reading through it. It's like, oh, it sounds like things are okay, and all of a sudden you get to the problem, right? So doing something that makes it easier for the person who's got to go through and review these and resolve them, this is a way that AI has kind of been taken a couple different ways and providing some data to help and get things started. And that's, having had a couple of conversations with customers who were doing, call center stuff, like, these are the things we need to kind of think about. That's not just resolving or building an application to handle it, but how can you make the application smarter, not only for the customer service person, but also potentially, I guess, for the user as well.
I guess that's interesting because I know I can only guess that. In fact, it's probably even been stated, even if I don't know for sure. If I look at, say, .NET ASP.NET Core, the repository on GitHub, and there's 3,500 issues. These all get categorized and labeled.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't believe it's being done by people at this point, at least to start.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Certainly people might be coming in and adding, like, hey, this needs X, Y, or Z. But I suppose, based on, and I don't know this for sure, I'm just guessing, but I suppose it would be possible to look at this issue and to recognize, oh, this is Blazor.
Mm-hmm.
And this is identity. And then so that tag is just on immediately. And then maybe that even helps program managers go straight to looking at issues that matter to them. And maybe these things get added by the program managers, or maybe not. I don't really know. I could only imagine a lot of this could be figured out from the issue itself.
And that's pretty interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. I looking at those and going through those for a couple different repos where I've made some comments and things like, oh, well, they're probably doing some they're probably manually going through it. And I think some part of that, you're right, they are, but it's quite possible in GitHub, because Actions not only do things like the continuous integration and the continuous deployment, but you can also have an action that fires when somebody drops a new issue in your repo. So you could do that, right? Hey, what's the issue? Go send it to an LLM, categorize it, summarize it, yeah, I mean, you've got the categories listed in there inside of the repo. So that absolutely could be something that's possible.
Yeah, I am not claiming that I know. I'm
Same.
just
I'm
that.
just walking through the
Yeah,
kind of the process. And yeah, that it's something that if there was an action that winds up in the marketplace that points to the GitHub models to run against, right? Even your small repo could have that capability.
yeah. I was gonna try to run this eShop support. It looks like
There's a lot to it, and because part of what it needs to do, and this we actually had we did this part a little bit on the show when we were starting it down the path of the user group application, right?
right.
How do you create the data? And there's a it's not the source, it's seed data folder at the top there. That seed data folder has essentially the information and the prompts to go to the LLM to go and create the products and the categories and the descriptions and the documentation and everything you need for this app to run, which is, you know, impressive
Yeah,
all on its own.
right, right. Like this is just to sort of bootstrap it.
Yep.
But you're right. There's a lot going on here.
Because some of the conversation was in German. That's why the
Yeah,
last one text is.
that's pretty cool though. So
Mhm.
again, translating it, huh? Very interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I don't
So
know if it just runs.
it. I don't know.
Sure,
It's been a while since I just
sure. I'm
ran
just
it.
gonna click. I'm just gonna click it and see what happens.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, it could just not work. But
Well, I mean,
uh,
it is also a it's an Aspire app, so you get the dashboard there, and it will tell you what containers are running or not. Because I think one of them does a local Olama container, so that it doesn't have to go ping out to the server.
yeah, I don't have Docker
Okay.
running.
Okay.
But I mean, I will. I just usually don't start it.
No,
I don't.
same, same.
I think I have it as not. Yeah, not part of startup. But let's see.
Yeah.
Of course, it's probably going to want
But
to
I,
update.
but I think this is one of those things for those watching, or in the future, or we have a few people watching now. This is an interesting application to go start up and think about. Kind of see some of the things that are happening asynchronously that involve generative AI, and some things that happen synchronously too, as part of your as when you're in the app. I mean, there is still a chat component, but it's in a place that makes sense when you think about interacting with that kind of model. Whereas having a chat component to do the categorization or to do the summarization, it's like I don't that should all be there waiting for me as the end user.
Yeah. So a lot went on here. Some things didn't start up,
Mm-hmm.
but other than that, again, I did nothing more than just try it. So like the Python
Yeah,
inference didn't start up, and who
yeah,
knows why? Because I
that's
don't know
funny.
why.
There's actually a Python project in there.
Yeah. Right. Maybe there's something I had to do. There might have even been instructions. So
Mm-hmm.
imagine that. There might have even been instructions in the eShop support. Yeah, right. So there's some stuff here that I may have to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely try it out. I think you'll see a lot as you go through that process.
Okay, that's cool. But you're right. There's a lot here. Like it fired up one, two, three, four, five different containers.
Mm-hmm.
Postgres for eShop support, a Redis, then this vector DB, which I don't I don't know much about this, and then Olama, an Olama container, which I also don't really know much about, other than I recognize the term Olama. So,
Yeah.
what is the
So
difference between Olama and you know when I'm using? when I go onto OpenAI Studio or something and pick GPT 4.0 or something? Are they even comparable, or is that a different thing?
They are comparable, and if you were to go to OpenAI and go to OpenAI Foundry, there's then you get access to the 1,800 plus models that are out there, and what you can do is there are various slicers and filters that can essentially limit the number of models down to a rational number of choices so that you can make a decision on them based on what it is you're looking for. So if you're looking for chat completion, yes, you can use GPT model. You can use model, Mistral models, Phi models. They all do some kind of chat completion, but then you can go into them and say, all right, what's this good at? And something like a GPT model, it's a large model. It's been trained on a large amounts of data. So it does have some information it's kind of aware about, whereas something like some of the Phi models that you look at, they're not necessarily trained to provide knowledge back. You want those models, you want to be using in more of a grounding kind of scenario where here's the data you need to iterate over. Go make a response based on this, right? So those kind of comparisons are what's inside of the AI Foundry that lets you make those choices. And then you can also see the important stuff like, have I deployed this somewhere in my environment? What's the cost of running it? Code samples of how you interact with it, all those important things you need to kind of get started.
Now, is there a difference between OpenAI Foundry and Azure AI Foundry, or is that what you were talking about?
Yeah, so naming's hard.
Yeah, right.
As we've been saying. So essentially everything has coalesced. Basically, AI Foundry is the starting point if you're doing AI for your applications, if you've not done stuff before. It's a great place to start because all the things are there. And then it starts by giving you essentially what you create is what's called an AI hub. And I'm assuming this is on the documentation. Okay. I don't know if you're going to go into your subscription, but what happens is you get an AI hub, and the AI hub gives you some of the core components you might need to do a generative AI solution or have some kind of generative AI functionality in your application. So obviously we're going to need some kind of an OpenAI service. So that's where the foundation or the frontier models exist that you can choose from. You may also want to have AI search, which is that vector database that you were looking at in the, it's not using, he has a different version of it, but essentially it's the same function. The idea being my data that I'm searching over that I want to use to ground the context of the response. Typically you put some kind of a vectorized index over it. So you're not just keyword searching, you're actually searching for the phrase that the user asked and see where in the content that you have, where that matches based on the vector that is this multi-dimensional vector that gets created between the documents and what's being asked. So that's a hub. And then once you have a hub, then you can come along and create a project. So maybe you have a project that wants to be some kind of a chat interface, or maybe you want to take advantage of something actually I think that just went public preview yesterday, which is agents, and being able to create an agent AI that sits, that basically does a certain portion of work and working, putting agents together so that they can complete a task essentially. Those are the starting place for all of that. If you're new to this, on the Azure side is AI Foundry.
Yeah, I decided just to see how exciting is it if I come here. And so I guess because I have no projects, I'm assuming that might be partially why it gave me this sort of getting started view.
Yep. Yeah. So if you go, and I think if you create the project, it's going to say, do you want to, it's going to also ask you to create the hub as well. Yeah. So right. So that first instance of, I'm going to do a project, but in the customize section, I'm going to give you a hub. And what the hub is so that Azure AI, OpenAI, and maybe an AI search, because it's sitting in the hub, it's now available to all the projects that sit inside of that hub. And as you create maybe a connection to a database for your project, you can say, well, keep it in this project, or this is something I need to share across all the hubs. And I can basically have that connection be, kind of move up and be shared across all the projects that might be in this hub.
Okay.
So it does, depending on, once you hit create and go through that, it'll create those services in your Azure subscription, essentially.
Yeah. I noticed that it wasn't allowing me to pick certain subscriptions, which
Oh, okay.
there could be
Is
a
it
reason
because,
why. I'm
so
not 100% sure.
yeah, you may want to try and stand up an OpenAI instance in your subscription. I've seen it in the past. You used to have to go through a process of saying, "Hey, can you enable this feature inside of my subscription?" and go through, the approvals of, kind of talk a little bit about how you're using it. So that's the only limitation. That's a limitation I can think of as you start to try it out. Thinking. Let's see. Create.
Okay, so it is. What is
I mean,
this
it
called?
looks like
It's just
it's,
an OpenAI.
yeah.
So you have to create an OpenAI service. That's like what you're kind of doing there is just a place to put things, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Oh,
exactly. So that's where you choose the models you want to use, deploy your models. It's where you get your endpoints and your keys to be able to interact with the service.
yeah, because I'm not 100% sure how this would go. And then, of course, we just next through the rest of it.
Yeah. Well, so the networking right now, you've left it open, which, obviously when we get to think about putting that behind a private endpoint, and then, yeah, the other was just tags for addressing those pieces. So now, once you have a service created, you
Yeah,
create
I'm not 100% sure if it takes a second or if maybe it's possible that subscription doesn't. I don't know if that subscription allows it or not. I just
Oh
don't know.
no!
I don't know.
So this error says you're missing role-based permissions on the subscription.
Okay. Okay. I remember what you were
So there's
saying about there was a place where you signed up, and now I'm trying to remember how long ago that was and what did I do? Because I do remember trying to sign up for this, and then I probably forgot. Okay.
cool.
Yeah, I mean it seems like it still feels very unclear. Like to me, is what do you do? And I know there are places to start. Like
Hmm.
if I remember correctly, there is a there used to be this is it, isn't it? Oh no, maybe not. There used to be a generative AI for beginners. Um, and it's on GitHub.
Okay.
But here we go. I found it. So there's this. I'm almost positive this is it. Yeah, and
Oh,
it's up to
okay.
version 3 now. It's up to version 3. So
Nice.
I remember last year they said they were going to come out with a version 2. I did not realize that they continued on. But the thing about this is all published as a website as well. So you can actually go through this, and it goes through all the same things, saying here's what you need, and they tell you I mean, so obviously you can use different things now. You can use GitHub models, you can use OpenAI API, you can use OpenAI service. And I think I was going to say maybe they walk you through what to do, but that's okay. So I
That's
know
cool.
that this is, yeah, I didn't know if you were aware of this.
I've not the site of it. I've seen. It might be in Azure Developers. In one of the YouTube channels, there was the course or the videos that go along with this, if I'm not mistaken. So I dropped a link to that in the chat because that's good to know about.
So I've known that this exists, and I know that it's basically, hey, you can use this. I just didn't realize that it had been updated recently, which is good. It's the whole GitHub repo. They recommend you could clone it if you wanted. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I forget which post. So I'm borrowing it from some of the GitHub folks. But basically, you know, any developer can be an AI developer is what it comes down to, because it's, you know, it uses the techniques and the tools that you already have. It's a matter of, you know, understanding the right way to talk to those tools and the right message to share and get back. But in the end, it's whatever application you're infusing the AI into, and RESTful calls or bringing in an SDK to kind of help with some of those capabilities. You know, we've seen things here like semantic kernel to be able to help with, you know, brokering that communication between your code and the LLMs essentially. So yeah, it's just another tool that developers should be aware of and understand. So when they do come asking, they're kind of aware and ready to jump in. I mean, and that's why, I don't know, like that's why I guess a couple sessions ago we started looking at GitHub models as a way to get started. So it all kind of comes back to the beginning of that.
I'm trying to understand the difference between procedural generation and content generate, like generative AI. Like I imagine they're related, but you know, like let's talk about. I'm going to go to games because it's easy for me. Is if you talk about Minecraft,
Right?
that world is procedurally generated, and you know, Marcus Pearson read some PhD papers on. I don't understand these terms, but things like Perlin noise and so on, in order to create these realistic enough voxel-based worlds that were unique every time. Every time you start the game, you start a new Minecraft world. You just have this new canvas, but it's both. It's what's interesting about it is it's both familiar and new. Like no two are alike, but at the same time, you know, it's recognizable. It's not like it creates little, you know, oceans with worthless islands. There's a value to the world that makes it fun to play in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was all done procedurally. So you write code that in the end is still deterministic. Maybe it uses a random number generator here and then, but it still deterministically is building something. I'm very curious about what can I do with generative AI so that perhaps I was building a game and I wanted the world to feel very alive. So I just want every so often to generate like some character that might be walking down the street that has something interesting to say that you may never interact with. You might just let them pass by. But if you do interact with them, then they have a name and what they're in the middle of doing. And heck, maybe it would even be interesting if it was an RPG type thing that it could lead to a quest that you take on. I feel like now is that taking advantage of generative AI so that you aren't trying to dream up thousands and thousands and thousands of these, or even the randomization of them.
Yep. Yeah. So I think what you hit on there, the important word of deterministic is important, right? As developers, you know, much of the code that we write and the way we think about our code is in deterministic patterns. We know putting in this input is going to give us this output at the end, and where some of our thoughts as developers need to shift a little bit to, in some places where we take advantage of generative AI. And I think bringing in a character, a new character or some new side quest, and just letting that evolve in and of itself, I think that's a perfect example of where generative AI and non-deterministic programming can, lead to some interesting interactions in gameplay. It's I know you have a good bit of game background and game development, or at least certainly interests around that. And I think that's thinking about including it that way is one of the possible uses, not only in what we saw with those films at the beginning of just creating the story and creating the characters and creating the world essentially, or at least the description of those, and then maybe even down to the images of those. I think all of that kind of a application space is kind of, a place where you could easily get started there and do that.
I've tried using Chat GPT to, and I think maybe I don't really work too hard on the prompts, but I've definitely tried having a conversation. In fact, I've even got like here where I said, okay, I was basically saying I'm going to use this to come up with like just an idea.
Yeah.
Imagine you're going to be the game master for a new RPG campaign, and I even kind of gave it a prompt, and then I kind of said like, okay, now something happened, but I don't know what it is. I just said, so what is it? Tell me what happened. And then it wrote, and I was like, okay. And even if I don't use this, like there's a possibility, now this is me using it as a human, that I would look at this and say, so what did I get out of this? I may not use any of this, but what I got out of it was the descriptive nature of it. So I said, okay, well, I got sights, I got sounds. Maybe I should consider that. I should remember as a writer that I can't just say like this happened. It should be interesting. And then I kind of said like, I just tried to get it to really dig in.
Yeah.
And it was okay. There was nothing wrong with it. I found it interesting though to play this way. There's somebody online. I don't know if I can find. I'm sure they're not the only person. I'm sure more than one person has tried this to somehow use AI. I don't know if it's the GPT model or some other OpenAI model to basically try to do a solo campaign by telling it the prompt is basically, okay, you're the game master. Give me the situation. Let's go.
Right.
And I think people have even like stream this, their attempt to try to use AI to have it to because I mean I will tell you, I think that there's a holy grail of tabletop RPGs that somebody is going to crack this nut, and I certainly can tell you that I believe the folks behind Dungeons and Dragons are desperately trying to crack this nut of being able to produce a game play that you might subscribe to, that you and your friends join up, and it's an AI dungeon master.
Yep.
And as much as people kind of poo-poo it and say like, oh, it'll never be as good, it only has to be good enough. And now you've taken that burden off of busy people who, when they were in 8th grade, had all the time in the world to create maps and I mean, not that I didn't do this, to create maps of entire worlds and towns and keeps and dungeons and everything. And you just don't have that time anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I do know some people who have created and basically set up a chat interface, chat application that the grounding context of that conversation is a D&D map or the rules around, for the master essentially to be able to go through. So all you're doing is having, now that interface of asking the dungeon or the dungeon master the question, and then it's looking through its context of data and saying, well, this is the relevant answer based on the gameplay we're currently doing.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to figure out the difference between the improvisation that you want versus teaching a computer how to run a game. Because you could teach a
Mm-hmm.
computer how to run checkers or how to run Risk, and
Right.
that's just deterministic rules. So it's like, I want you to know those rules, but then I also want you to have the improvisation for, okay, they want to do X, Y, and Z. And to be honest, I didn't really even think, like, this happens. This is the common thing that happens all the time. I didn't really think what would happen if they wanted to start digging up the cemetery. So you got to make it up pretty
Right.
quickly.
Yeah.
And I feel like there is a nut to crack there that if somebody does, I truly believe somebody will. And I
Yeah.
think you talk about Minecraft selling 300 million copies, or apparently Take-Two said in their investor call yesterday that they sold 15 million copies of Grand Theft Auto 5.
Oh wow.
It'll be unreal. Whoever
Yeah.
figures this out, it will be unreal. I
Because
think.
I do, because I think that world of Grand Theft Auto is all, there's a path, right,
Yeah,
of the story, but
right.
there are all those different side quests
Yes.
that if you're just following the story you never get to. And I think what you were talking about earlier of spawn up this interesting side quest, and the rules around it, and the interactivity with it and what happens in that non-deterministic kind of way. And if you do, you get 500 points or whatever it is for solving it, or you get some kind of a
Yeah.
special weapon or something, right? But those things could come in and out of the core part of the gameplay quite easily.
Yeah, like Grand Theft Auto is known for, or at least usually considered is that the world feels generally alive. Now, you
Mm-hmm.
play it long enough and you'll recognize the phrases, you'll recognize the complaint that some lady makes as she crosses the street. You'll recognize those things, and you'll also kind of ask yourself, like, boy, the drivers are kind of stupid or whatever. But
Right.
the reality is in it generally feels like you're driving through a living world that is just, in order to make it run on your machine is loading up content on the map, getting stuff out of memory that was just a few blocks ago. Because as a player, the frustrating thing that'll happen is you left a car a few blocks back, but now by the time you get
Right.
back there, it's been wiped.
Yeah.
And those are not, I think, AI issues. I think that's just like, limits of our physical resources in our machines. But
Mm-hmm.
um, I feel like someone is going to figure this out, and I think when they do, and they figure out how to make it fun, which is
Yeah.
kind of like, it's something that I'm definitely interested in. I am not a AAA game developer, but I wonder, can you do it in a simpler web browser based game it's just fun and it's not trying to be crazy? But that sort of leads away from, I just think as developers is trying to figure out what to do with this stuff is hard. I struggle with it all the time. You've probably heard me say it over and over,
Mm.
is what do I do and how do I start? And the answers are there. So I guess the trick is trying not to run into roadblocks. That eShop support is really interesting. I'm going to see if I can get that running a
Yeah.
little later.
Yeah. It's worth the time to get that up and running for sure, because there's a lot of things you can pick up and learn from that. That's a good example.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as far as where we're going, I think there's some real interesting things to talk about on future shows. Like the .NET team seems to be getting deep into finalizing what .NET 10 they're gonna try to do. There's
Yeah.
been a few shows recently on the .NET channel that are focused very clearly on, here's what we plan to do on the server side, here's what we plan to do on the website. And then I think, as you pointed out to me, I know you pointed out to me, they very recently discussed the authentication side. And
Yeah.
that really got my attention. And it starts off with some samples, which I think are really cool because I haven't gotten to dig into them yet. But we
Mm-hmm.
have had people ask us in comments, to give you an example, when we do our Blazor auth from scratch stuff using the Blazor web app template, even though that web app template, you might choose WebAssembly interactivity, you might choose what's called Blazor server, the SignalR interactivity, or you might choose auto, you might choose none. In the end, that is still a server-side web app. There is still a server or a farm that you deploy on. And a lot of people say, but I want to use Blazor WebAssembly standalone, which we tried recently and deployed the GitHub pages, which I thought was really cool. Just because I like the fact that the static web apps there. So then they ask, like, well, then wait a second, how do I do the JSON web token stuff? And the reality is, I go, you know what? I don't know. We're in that code trying to walk it back in the framework to see, like, what is it doing? What is it doing? What is it doing?
Yeah.
And it looks like there are some samples being created now and even some documentation being created. So I think that's really exciting. Just haven't gotten a chance to go over it.
Yeah.
But it could be something that this audience especially is interested in. So
yeah, I definitely think so, because that's, looking at the trend, the videos that are top of the list are all the authentication videos that you did in the past. So there's definitely a lot of interest and a lot of people looking for answers for sure. So it'd be fun to do some
we
shows
haven't
there.
we also haven't touched like the API side, which I've actually done a lot of professionally. So that's helpful. Of just, okay, I'm building an API. How do I secure it?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of things you can do. So, or at least just a lot of things you can learn. And I will tell you that I don't know that it's all fully 100% standardized. People sort of, sometimes I feel like we're kind of making it up as we go, but So anyways, it is almost time for stand up for me. So I'll have to get going. But
same. Get some work
no,
done.
thanks for this. And I certainly want to keep working at it and trying to come up with some applications that can take advantage of generative content. I know with the Hello Dolly app that I think you show a lot. I think it's pretty cool. Just because I like how I've always liked how the questions themselves come from the generative content and then the images. So, plus I think it's true that almost all the shows that Microsoft are doing nowadays, the video montages, the intros and everything, I think are generated content. I don't know if that's 100% true.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah. That's just what I've heard, is that when you like when we go to build, that the whatever the logo is, I don't know who said that. I don't remember. Maybe I'm dreaming, but
no, it's possible. I mean, you saw as you were going through the list of applications and things that can generate video, an interesting video. I think there were definitely some Adobe products in there that were doing that from the logos.
Yeah.
And those are usually the high end, video stuff.
What I'd love to do is figure out. So what was interesting about that generative AI for beginners is they recommend using a GitHub code space, and I understand why. Is they're thinking, hey, you don't have to worry about deployment and getting everything right. It's just going to work. But and I like that stuff too. So I like having pull from source and it just works. So be happy to look at that stuff too. But at this point, I got to get going. So
same.
Hopefully it was a good discussion. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you watch, and if you have any questions or want to pivot on anything we talked about, let us know in the comments on YouTube. You can find us on youtube.com/TheDevTalkShow. I'm pretty sure that's right. There may be, I think you can optionally put an @sign in front of the Dev Talk Show, but I'm pretty sure that's optional. Otherwise, you see us on Twitch, see us on YouTube Live, and hopefully, I don't know how Monday will go, just because we're going to be interested in this football game.
Oh, yeah.
But
Monday might be a late morning.
Yeah, so I understand that. So maybe next Tuesday you'll see us.
Definitely.
But if that's it, Rich, then I will get to go here.
Same. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate the being willing to discuss this out, because we just kind of winged it. So
yeah. I mean, I have a lot of questions, and it's a lot of it is just how do I use this, and I think there's more that we can talk about. So in any case, for Rich, I'm Chris, and we will see you all. Have a great Super Bowl weekend if that's what you're doing this weekend, and if not, no matter where you are in the world, we will see you all next time on the Dev Talk Show.
Yep. Go Birds.